They were Hollywood legends on screen, but behind the spotlight, they hid shocking racist beliefs. Get ready to uncover the dark truths behind the glamour in classic Hollywood celebrities who were racist in reality. John Wayne. John Wayne, the rugged face of American westerns, was once hailed as a symbol of patriotism and strength. But beneath the cowboy hat and tough guy persona was a man whose views shocked even in his own time. In a 1971 interview with Playboy magazine, Wayne openly stated that he believed in white supremacy, claiming that black people were not yet mature or responsible enough for civil rights. He also criticized Native Americans, saying he didn't feel guilty about the genocide they suffered, justifying it as a necessary step in building America. These weren't slip-ups or out-of-context remarks. Wayne stood by them proudly. While some fans still idolize him, others can't ignore how deeply his words reflected the casual racism embedded in Hollywood's golden age. Today, as his legacy continues to be celebrated in films and festivals, a new generation is questioning whether the myth of John Wayne should still be honored, or finally be brought down to reality. D.W. Griffith. D.W. Griffith is often called the father of modern cinema, but his legacy is stained with racism that shaped more than just movies. His 1915 film The Birth of a Nation is considered a technical masterpiece, introducing groundbreaking editing and narrative techniques. But behind its innovation lies one of Hollywood's most dangerous and hateful messages. The film glorifies the Ku Klux Klan, portrays black people as violent and unintelligent, and reinforces deeply racist stereotypes. Worse, it was wildly successful and praised by U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, who allegedly called it like writing history with lightning. Griffith defended the film for years, refusing to acknowledge its harm, and his follow-up movie Intolerance was less about challenging prejudice and more about defending himself. His work didn't just reflect racism, it fueled it, inspiring real-world violence and Klan recruitment. While he changed the way movies were made, Griffith also proved how powerful and destructive cinema can be when it spreads hate. His name may be carved into film history, but so is the damage he helped cause. Walter Brennan. Walter Brennan, one of the most decorated actors in Hollywood history, won 3 Academy Awards and built a reputation as a lovable, old-fashioned character actor. But behind that warm on-screen image was a man with deeply troubling beliefs. Off-camera, Brennan was notoriously outspoken about his far-right views and was openly racist, anti-communist, and extremely conservative, even by mid-20th century standards. Crew members and fellow actors recalled Brennan making hateful comments about minorities and cheering when civil rights activists were attacked on TV. He was a staunch supporter of segregation and was allegedly furious about Hollywood becoming more inclusive during the 1960s. Some reports suggest he believed Martin Luther King Jr. was a communist agitator and that America was being overrun by un-American elements. Brennan's personal views were extreme even among conservative circles of his time, and yet Hollywood largely turned a blind eye. While audiences remember his charming roles in classics like The Westerner and My Darling Clementine, his disturbing off-screen ideology paints a far less endearing portrait of a man once adored by millions. Walt Disney. Walt Disney, an icon of imagination, childhood wonder, and family entertainment. But behind the magical kingdom he built lies a legacy that many find troubling. While Disney revolutionized animation and built an empire of joy, his company's early work was often laced with racial stereotypes and harmful caricatures. Films like Dumbo and Song of the South portrayed black characters in deeply offensive, demeaning ways, reinforcing ideas rooted in white supremacy and segregationist attitudes. Critics and historians have long pointed to these films as evidence of Disney's tolerance, if not outright endorsement, of racism. Beyond his films, Disney was accused of harboring racist views in private, with some claiming he associated with known anti-Semitic and white nationalist groups in the 1930s. Though defenders argue there's no concrete proof of personal bigotry, others insist his company's content speaks volumes. Today, Disney's legacy is being re-examined, not to cancel him, but to recognize that even the brightest fairy tales can have dark origins. It's a reminder that the man who created dreams also left behind questions that still make audiences uncomfortable. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was once Hollywood's golden boy, a child star who transitioned into a beloved actor across generations. But one of his most infamous roles has come to define a disturbing part of his legacy. In the 1961 film Breakfast at Tiffany's, Rooney portrayed Mr. Yunioshi, a Japanese landlord, using exaggerated makeup, fake buck teeth, a thick, offensive accent, and every imaginable stereotype. It was pure yellowface, and while audiences may have laughed at the time, modern viewers often find the performance shocking and painful. Rooney defended the role for decades, claiming he never meant to offend, but the damage was clear. his performance reduced an entire culture to a cruel cartoon. Asian American groups have long criticized the role, calling it one of the most racist portrayals in mainstream cinema. Even today, the scene is often edited or prefaced with disclaimers. Mickey Rooney may have brought joy to many with his earlier work, but Breakfast at Tiffany's stands as a reminder that racism in Hollywood wasn't just behind the camera, it was front and center, performed for laughs. Katharine Hepburn is often hailed as a trailblazing feminist icon, fierce, independent, and one of the most celebrated actresses in Hollywood history. But while her screen presence broke gender norms, her personal and professional choices raised troubling questions about race. Throughout her long career, Hepburn largely remained silent on civil rights, even during pivotal moments in American history. More notably, she starred in several films that either excluded people of color or portrayed them through a whitewashed lens. In The African Queen and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, critics argue that while the films touched race, they did so from a white savior or sanitized perspective. Behind the scenes, some former colleagues claimed Hepburn held elitist, racially insensitive views, though she carefully protected her public image. While not as overt as others, her quiet complicity and refusal to challenge Hollywood's racist norms speak volumes. In an industry that desperately needed voices of change, Hepburn remained a symbol of privilege. Her legacy may glitter with awards, but her silence during a time of racial injustice adds a shadow to her golden image. Fred Astaire, the legendary dancer and actor, remains one of Hollywood's most revered stars, known for his impeccable style and revolutionary dance moves. However, his career is not without controversy. Astaire's most infamous moment involving race came in his 1941 film Holiday Inn, where he performed a dance routine alongside a blackface portrayal of himself. The scene, part of a larger number featuring racial stereotypes, was meant to showcase his character's holiday spirit but instead reinforced harmful stereotypes about African Americans. While many fans overlooked it at the time, the use of blackface is now seen as a clear example of Hollywood's normalization of racism. Astaire's film career is marked by performances that often excluded or marginalized people of color. While he later distanced himself from the practices of racial stereotyping in film, his early career undeniably contributed to the perpetuation of racist tropes. Astaire's undeniable talent and groundbreaking choreography don't erase the fact that his legacy is tainted by an era where racism was all too prevalent, and even celebrated in Hollywood's golden age. Spencer Tracy, one of Hollywood's greatest actors, is remembered for his powerful performances and immense talent. However, his off-screen behavior and views reveal a darker side of his legacy. Tracy's 1967 film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is often praised for addressing racial issues, with Tracy portraying a liberal father who must accept his daughter's interracial marriage. However, behind the scenes, Tracy's personal beliefs and actions suggested a different reality. While he publicly supported civil rights, he privately held deeply ingrained prejudices, especially toward black people. He was known to have struggled with accepting racial integration in his personal life and was even reported to have made offensive remarks about African Americans. Despite his public image as a progressive figure, Tracy's racism was a product of the time, and it influenced both his work and his personal relationships. Though he was lauded for his acting, Tracy's complex and contradictory stance on race reveals how even Hollywood's greatest stars were not immune to the prejudices of their era. Wallace Beery was a beloved actor in the 1930s and 1940s, known for his rugged masculinity and larger-than-life performances. However, beneath the tough guy persona lay troubling racial prejudices that were not uncommon in Hollywood during his time. Beery's career was marked by his roles in films where racial stereotypes were perpetuated, and he was often involved in projects that reinforced these negative portrayals. In particular, Beery's portrayal of Native Americans and African Americans was consistently problematic, relying on offensive tropes that have not aged well. On set, Beery was known to make racially insensitive remarks and was reported to have been openly hostile toward non-white actors, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere for many. Despite his fame and success, Beery's personal views on race were deeply ingrained in the era's prevailing biases. While he remains a figure of Hollywood's golden age, it's important to recognize that his contributions to film were also tainted by the racism that shaped not only his work but the entire entertainment industry of his time. John Ford, one of the most influential directors in Hollywood history, is celebrated for his westerns and the way he shaped the genre. Yet, his career and personal views are marked by racism that's hard to overlook. Ford's films often portrayed Native Americans in a one-dimensional, negative light, reinforcing stereotypes of savagery and barbarism. While some of his works, like The Searchers, are seen as more nuanced, Ford himself held views that were far from progressive. He was known to make disparaging remarks about Native Americans and people of color, often viewing them through a lens of superiority and disdain. Ford's relationship with his actors, particularly those of Native American descent, reflected his prejudiced attitudes, with many claiming that he treated them as lesser beings. His films may have helped define the Western genre, but they also helped perpetuate the toxic, racist myths about the American frontier. Ford's legacy as a master filmmaker is undeniable, but it's also tainted by the racial biases that were present both on and off screen. Bette Davis, one of Hollywood's greatest actresses, was known for her fierce independence, undeniable talent, and iconic roles in films like All About Eve and Jezebel. However, her legacy is also intertwined with troubling instances of racism that have resurfaced over time. Davis was a product of her era, and her personal views sometimes reflected the racial prejudices common in Hollywood during the mid-20th century. Though she was known to stand up for equal rights in her career and was publicly supportive of black actors, she was also criticized for making racially insensitive comments behind the scenes. Her relationship with some African American actors, such as her treatment of Hattie McDaniel during Jezebel, reveals a contradictory side to Davis's character. While McDaniel won an Oscar for her role, Davis, though reportedly supportive of McDaniel's talent, still operated within the racial hierarchies of her time, often reflecting the prevailing racial attitudes of Hollywood. Davis's undeniable talent is often overshadowed by her personal complicity in a deeply racist system. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling star known for his charm and heroic roles in films like The Adventures of Robin Hood, was the epitome of a Hollywood leading man. However, his personal life and views were far less heroic. Flynn's off-screen behavior, particularly his treatment of women and minorities, was often problematic. He was known for making racist remarks and holding prejudiced views, which were reflected in some of his roles and personal relationships. Flynn frequently portrayed colonialist characters in films, reinforcing harmful stereotypes about non-white cultures. In private, Flynn was criticized for his disregard of racial equality and his association with figures who supported segregation. His views on race were aligned with the era's prevailing attitudes, yet they stood in stark contrast to his public image as a progressive, daring figure. Despite his undeniable star power and contributions to Hollywood's golden age, Flynn's legacy remains tainted by his personal complicity in a deeply racist culture, a reminder that even the most beloved icons were not exempt from the biases of their time. Lionel Barrymore, an iconic actor in Hollywood's golden age, was known for his roles in films like It's a Wonderful Life and A Free Soul. However, despite his reputation for playing kind and dignified characters, his personal beliefs and actions often reflected the racial prejudices of his time. Barrymore was openly conservative and his political views were frequently aligned with segregationist and anti-progressive stances. He was known to make racially insensitive comments and, like many of his contemporaries, held negative stereotypes about African Americans and other minority groups. In his personal life, Barrymore reportedly associated with individuals who supported segregation and voiced support for the status quo of racial inequality. His public image as a beloved, sympathetic actor on screen clashed with the racist attitudes he privately expressed. Time may pass, but true legends never fade. These weren't just stars, they were dazzling dreams brought to life. Relive the glamour, the grace, and the golden era. Like the video, comment your favorite icon, and subscribe to Golden Age Icon, where vintage magic never dies.